French plane was locked on by a German plane from behind, but the French pilot suddenly pulled out a smoke device. He hit it hard and released smoke. Thick black smoke came out from the back of the plane. It looked like the plane had been hit by bullets, but the German plane kept chasing. The French pilot quickly shut off the engine, pretending the plane was out of control. He started spinning and falling toward the ground. This trick fooled the German pilot. Just as the German plane turned to leave, the French pilot suddenly pulled up. He quietly got behind the German plane and started firing at it. The bullets broke a support rod on the wing. The top wing flipped in the wind. The German plane almost lost control. It had to fly back to its own trenches. The 16th German Infantry Regiment in the trenches immediately fired their machine guns into the sky to support their plane. At that time, a young Adolf was in the trenches, nervously watching the air battle. The French plane kept chasing hard, firing bullets from behind like crazy. Soon another part of the wing was hit. The German plane was about to crash. The German pilot had a sudden idea. He threw a fishing net out the back. The net got tangled in the French plane's propeller. The French plane lost power. The French pilot had no choice but to make an emergency landing. Thanks to his great flying skills, he landed safely in the middle of the battlefield. At the same time, the German plane, with only one wing left, also crash-landed behind him. But without the second wing, the plane couldn't stop in time and slammed straight into the ground. The French pilot, Georges, saw this and took out a brush and ink. He painted a black cross on the German plane to mark his 30th enemy plane down. But this made the German pilot, Gunther, very angry. Quickly erase this mark. It was me who shot you down. But Georges believed his plane was still in perfect condition. It just didn't stop properly during the landing. Obviously, my plane is perfectly fine. Yours doesn't even have wings anymore. Gunther couldn't win the argument with Georges, so he pulled out a pistol and tried to take Georges back as a prisoner. Georges didn't want trouble, so he raised his hands and pretended to surrender. When Gunther let his guard down, Georges kicked the gun out of his hand. Before joining the army, Georges was a boxing coach. Even if Gunther used both hands, he still wasn't a match for Georges. In just a few moves, Gunther was on the ground. But while Georges was teasing him, a French artillery strike suddenly began. At that dangerous moment, both men jumped into a shell crater to avoid the bombs. That's how the two stopped fighting and became friends. After World War I ended, Georges returned home and became a boxing coach. Gunther stayed in the army and became a high-ranking German officer. In 1936, Germany held the Summer Olympics. Georges represented France and came to Germany to compete. On the train to Germany, he met a Jewish orphan named Simon, who was going to Berlin to find his grandparents. Georges was kind and helpful by nature, so he decided to help the boy. But Georges didn't know that Germany had already started secretly arresting Jews. As soon as they arrived in Germany, Simon's grandparents were taken away. Simon had to run and hide 200 kilometers north of Munich, out in the wild. So Georges went to ask Gunther for help. They flew a plane over Munich. Georges carried a parachute and jumped from the sky. He landed safely and found the Jewish boy, Simon.